the law or the foundation of God's throne.
Așa că atunci când el a atacat fundația sau legea,
He tried to change the structure and the order of God's government.
el a încercat să schimbe structura și ordinea guvernământului lui Dumnezeu.
And ever since then,
Și încă de pe atunci,
he has manipulated the minds of men
el a manipulat mințile oamenilor
to be out of harmony with God's government.
ca să fie în afara armoniei cu guvernul.
Again, I want to say hello. It's Pastor Deron Tinsley. As some of you may know, I've just recently returned from Romania. This is my second time going there for their camp meeting that they have every year. The Three Angels Missionary School there in the country of Romania, the beautiful mountains of Romania. And so I was privileged to go 2 years. The first time I went was 2015, and the second time was just recently, about a few weeks ago. Both times was a great experience. This time, I won't say it was better. It added to that first experience that I had while I was there the first time. While I was there, or I mentioned prior to me going to the country of Romania, I had been going through the Testimonies, reading them through. And as I was ending volume 7 of the Testimonies, going into volume 8, is when the trip took place. And for some time prior to that, I had voiced, I guess, something that I was experiencing from reading through the Testimonies, and that was that what I'm reading, I'm not seeing it, meaning that I'm not being able to imagine this experience in the Testimonies in regards to our schools, in regards to sanitariums, medical missionary work, the ministry or pastoring, evangelism, all of these things. And so when in relation to ministry, a lot of the things that I'm reading, I was not seeing. Mind you, I have been a part of a big ministry. You know, I've been to different places in this world, this country, participating in evangelistic crusades, knocking on doors in some of the worst areas known to our civilized world, places where police are reluctant to go, and many people, for that factor, are reluctant to go. I've been in some of the worst places in Chicago, Los Angeles, just again California at large. I've been to these places. And so as I've been doing ministry for a number of years and reading through the Testimonies, I'm looking at these things and I'm saying, I have not seen this. I can only imagine what Oakwood looked like in its early days. And Emmanuel Missionary College, which is now Andrews University, what Madison could have looked like, the Morning Star in the South, imagining what this work could have looked like. And I remember speaking with one of my brothers, and I believe I even voiced this to my wife, and that is, it's something trying to convince people of something that you have not seen before. You've read it, it's obvious, and yet having no real conception of what this could look like. And that was the experience that I had been having over the course of my readings through the testimonies. And so going to Romania, I had no idea what I was going to experience. I had no idea what was there. We talked over the phone. And so here I am, jumping on a plane by faith, going to Romania. And while I was there, I was surprised as to the work that was being done there. And again, the pictures that we see don't do a real justice. I mean, the ambiance, the scenery is breathtaking, it's beautiful. But it is the work that is being done there that has jerked my heart. And while I was there, I believe I was there maybe a couple of days. And as I'm still reading, the Spirit of God began to impress upon my mind, look, listen. And the conversations that I was having with Brother Andrew about the facility, the history of the facility, the buildings, the grounds, and what I was reading and the conception of what I was reading began to come together through that Three Angels Missionary School there in the country of Romania. And I was able to see for the first time what I was reading actually being put into practice. And brothers and sisters, the spirit that is there among the workers, among the students that participate in it, a real desire to be a part of God's ministry. And that somewhat transitions into the experience that I had this time going. While I was there, Brother Vince and I had traveled to Romania, and he was going to do some of the preaching as well as I would. And so while we were there, again, sharing with him, what I knew about the grounds and so forth and so on, and, different things began to stand out this time. The work, the 2 years between the first visit and the second, the amount of work that they were able to accomplish, adding of new facility, cosmetics, and the adding the over 3,000 blueberry bushes, the things that they were able to do in the span of 2 years, translating of various Spirit of Prophecy books, Desire of Ages, Steps to Christ, and other books that they're working on, the Testimonies and song books of some of the old Adventist hymns from that first song book that was hymns for, what was it? It was hymns for a peculiar people that keep the commandments of God and have the faith of Jesus. That was the name of the first hymnal. And as they're putting those English hymns in the Romanian language, working on the testimonies, putting them in the Romanian language to give to the people. It was tremendous to see the amount of work that was going on there and what they were accomplishing in the centers of influence that they were seeking to establish over in the country of Romania, neighboring country of Moldova, the things that they're doing. And I was there prior to going into one of the evening meetings, and there was another gentleman there visiting. And we were out back and we were talking. And as we were, again, overlooking the property, the mountains that was there and the surrounding neighbors. And while we were there, it's interesting, the Lord began to give me an object lesson while I was talking with him. And I asked him the question, I said, notice that piece of property next door. And again, it's occupied by someone else. And I said, what is the difference between that property and this property? And I wasn't necessarily waiting for him to answer me, because I was sharing with him what the Lord was impressing upon my mind, even as we were speaking. And I said, do you know of any missionary endeavors that school is, that property next door is producing? Do we know of any facilities for workers and for missionary training schools? And it was obvious that none of those things were present on that other piece of property. And I said, what about the grounds, the agriculture? What is the difference? And the thing that we were bringing out was that the grounds were no more fertile where we were standing than the grounds over there. But the difference that the Lord was showing me was the mindset. That is what made the difference between the two properties. And brothers and sisters, the thing that God began to press upon my mind is the mind must change in order to participate in this work. And what is happening is we are trying to do a work that our minds are not prepared to do. We would look at what's happening in Romania and, man, we got to do this here in America. But the reality of it is we don't understand why it's happening there. It's happening because of the mindset that the people there have. They are not trying to blend two altars together. In other words, you look at the altar of Baal and the false prophets, and you look at the broken down altar that was neglected in Israel. And you didn't find Elijah trying to take stones from the altar of Baal and stones from the broken down altar and try to merge them together. You didn't find him taking some of the wood and some of the bullocks off of that well-established altar. I'm sure it was done well. I'm sure it was logistically sound. I'm sure that everything was right, and I'm sure that the offerings were the best that could possibly be gathered. But you don't find Elijah trying to grab stones and wood and anything off that altar and merge it with that of God. And what is happening, brothers and sisters, is why we cannot accomplish the work of God, why the ministry is the way that it is as a whole, is because we're trying to blend two opposites. We're trying to take the things of God and we're trying to blend this faulty constructed system that is not established according to any principles other than committees and working policies. And we're trying to bring the two together, and we feel that God will be accepted. It would be more acceptable to God if we could take the good from the altar of Baal and we don't even have to take everything from the broken down altar. Just take what is salvageable and bring the two together, and then we could collectively agree between the false prophets and God's work, and we can agree, and then God will send His blessing upon that altar. But what we find in the country of Romania, them doing there, is repairing the broken down altar. How did they repair it? Not by going to schools and seeing what was done in other places, but by picking up the testimonies, starting not in volume 7, not in volume 6 that deals with the educational work, not in 7 and 8 that deals with the sanitarian work, but going to volume 1, starting in volume 1 and recognizing that unless we're born again, we cannot strengthen the brethren. Unless we have that experience and understand what is said in volume 1 and begin to build from there ourselves. Before we build the work of God, ourselves must be built up, and we are strengthened as we can participate in God's work. And that's the thing that the Lord showed me this time going. The mind has to change. Because, brothers and sisters, what they are able to accomplish with 8 acres, 8, let's see, that's 5, 6, 7, 8. What they are able to accomplish with 8 acres, there are properties that I've visited, 1,000 acres, and are not producing this. 100, 200 acres not producing this. So brothers and sisters, it's not the acreage that is of a necessity. The mind has to change. And so you'll find individuals trying to acquire properties, trying to do this. But brothers and sisters, unless the mind change, the ministry will suffer. And when I'm talking about the ministry, brothers and sisters, again, that opens up a whole mind frame of what we think concerning the work of God. Because oftentimes, when we think of ministry, we think of what we may do. In other words, I'm a preacher, okay? And so I say, well, when I think of ministry, I'm thinking of a preacher. And then someone over here may say, well, I'm a medical missionary. And when they say ministry, they're thinking of what they do. And then you have a person over here that says, I'm a car porter. And where when he says ministry, he's thinking of what he does. But brothers and sisters, when God says ministry, God is talking about the entire whole. Preaching is not a ministry. Pastoring is not a ministry. It's a part of God's ministry. Being a medical missionary is not ministry. It's a part of the ministry that God has ordained to edify the church and to protect the movement that God has raised up in these last days. And what is happening is that many individuals have moved into their various corners with whatever talent or gift that they have acquired, and they have designated to themselves that this is my ministry. When in reality, brothers and sisters, the gifts that God has given to us are not ours. They're for the work of the church. They're for the work of God. And we have no right to withhold them from various individuals because it is to edify the church. And what has happened is because we have decided, okay, well, this is my ministry. My ministry is to show people, teach people that they shouldn't be listening to rap music. And my ministry is, well, I'm going to get people hooked off Hollywood. And my ministry is I'm going to get people from stop eating meat. And then my ministry is I'm going to get women out of short skirts. And then my ministry is I'm going to get parents to take their children out of public school. And then my ministry, and we all have these various ministries, not recognizing that the gifts that God has given to us are for the profiting of all of us, not some of us. And because we don't have that mindset, this is why you have a sanitarium here in America, and you don't see multiple sanitariums. Why? Because everyone just wants to focus on there. I'm a medical missionary, I've started a sanitarium, and I want everyone to come and help me. Okay, I started this over here, and I want everyone to come and help me. But I'm not thinking about the profiting of everything. Therefore, that's why you don't see people giving their influence to the support of another person. You don't see people saying, well, yes, we do have a sanitarium here in Michigan, but guess what? There's a great need for one in another state. And there's people there that are ready, that are willing to participate in the work. And so I'm going to not bring in all the donations to me. I am going to take that and begin to feed this other ministry. I'm going to feed this part of the ministry. Though I may not necessarily have direct control over it, I'm going to feed it because the work of God is needed. Until the mind changes, you'll never see that. You will always find people trying to get as much as they can for themselves until the mind changes. And that's the thing that the Lord was showing me this time that I was there, adding to it. Because we went the first time, and man, what a blessing it was. It inspired, it helped us to recognize what could be done. And then coming back, it impressed, we were put in a position where we were almost forced to move from the place that we were at. And it put a little fire up under us to launch out and to really cast our net on the other side. Where we were, we praise God for it. But one thing that my wife and I, the conclusion we came to is that what we believe God is asking of us, we're not going to be able to produce it at the current position we're in now. We're not going to be able to produce it. Lo and behold, the owners of the property wanted to move back to this side of the country, and they were deeply sorry. They didn't really want to do it, but they didn't have any other alternative, and they were going to need their property back, and they were very apologetic. And we said, my brother, please don't apologize. God is involved in this, and this is providential. God is pushing us faster than we intended to even go. And by God's grace, we're in the position we're in now. And some of the things that we've been able to see, God has put us in a place where these things can be accomplished. And so in the interim of doing all these things, going back to Romania, God said, the mind has to change, son. The mindset has to change. There can be no blending of the altar of Baal and the broken down altar. The mindset has to change as it relates to the work of God. And as I began to internalize that, I picked up articles from the Gospel of Health. Not the E.G. White CD-ROM where it talks about the Gospel of Health, but I went and we were able to find the actual articles from the Gospel of Health that had not only Spirit of Prophecy emphasis in it, but it also showed the work that was being done by the Morning Star in Mississippi and in other places. And as I began to read those articles, I began to see what the Lord was saying. The mind has to change. If the work is going to be done properly, the mind has to change. And the mind has to change in the light of saying, not seeing myself and what I do as the ministry, but seeing myself and what I do as part of the ministry that God is establishing, as a part of it. And so the idea is not, yes, I'm trying to accomplish something. What I'm seeking to do is for the profiting of withal. God has given gifts, and that's what God has given, to cooperate with the ministry, which is inclusive of gifts that I don't possess. And so that is the thing that God has been showing me. And that is the mindset that we now take up the work here in Georgia. And so I've just been I'm grateful to God for this opportunity to have seen the progress of the work in Romania, and also understanding what can be done here. You know, one thing I said to Brother Andrew while I was there, and that was, I said, in all honesty, I don't even know if this spirit exists in America. The spirit that is seen operating throughout that facility is that everyone recognizes their position and they do it faithfully. Whatever it is that they do, waking up 5 o'clock in the morning, chopping wood so that people can have hot water to take showers and baths, and people doing this, seeing how people are getting up, as they say here in America, till can't see in the morning, till can't see at night, preparing food, baking bread, picking blueberries so that people can eat in the morning and throughout the day. Going to the greenhouse and gathering the various things that are planted there so that they can have them in the kitchen and clean so that people can have to eat, and recognizing that what I do or what I am doing in preaching is no more important than the brothers or the sisters that are out in the field picking blueberries so that everyone can eat, realizing that what I'm preaching and my ability to preach is no more important than the man that's chopping wood, so that everyone could have hot water and hot showers in the morning. All of these things, brothers and sisters, are necessary for the work of the ministry. And when I saw that there, I began to realize that this change has to, Lord, you have to change my mind as it relates to the work, as it relates to what has been given to me as part of the ministry. And so this is some of the experiences that God has been able to bring to my mind, fervently to my mind, to help me understand what must take place. It's not so much the property, and yes, the property is important, yet is not as important as the changing of the mind. You can have 1,000 acres, brothers and sisters, and the only person that will be benefiting from that 1,000 acres are wild hogs and the coyotes. But if the mind is right, then God can put us in a place and can turn a wilderness into a barren field. And so we have to, again, pick up these books. And I don't know, I've been saying it, but I'm saying it again in more earnest, that brothers and sisters, we have to stop and pick up this conflict series. We have to pick up those books, Patriarchs and Prophets, Prophets and Kings, Desire of Ages, Acts of the Apostles, Great Controversy. We have to read through the Testimonies, the book Education, Thoughts from the Mount of Blessings, the Ministry of Healing. That falls, Steps of Christ, falls in harmony with Desire of Ages. We have to pick these things up to understand this conflict of the ages and how Satan has brought havoc on society, and strategic work that God has given us to do, and building up and bringing before the people the kingdom of God, the kingdom of grace, understanding the work of the church as you read through volume 1 to volume 9, not picking your favorite volume or what you think, but understanding where did the work begin. And brothers and sisters, the work didn't begin in many, we want to start a school, but that's not the foundation of the work. We want to start sanitariums. That's not the foundation of the work. We want to do this. We want to do that. And again, we're starting in the wrong places. We have to start where the work began. And again, many in this day and age don't want to do the heavy lifting. They don't want to do that uncomfortable work. And you say, well, what is that work? Well, brothers and sisters, we have too many people telling us what that work is, and we have never read it for ourselves. We have too many people defining what needs to be done in these last days. And many people are jumping from one video to another, from one meeting to another, from one quote-unquote ministry from another. And in between time, and in the meantime, we're not reading. We're reading sections that are put together for us. We're reading compilations that are being put together for us. We're reading and we're using this person's emphasis on this particular thing. But what about picking up the books ourselves? I was, dear brother Paul, I was there, and we were sitting at the table. And, he began to ask me some things, and I guess I'll get into some of the other things that he asked me later. But we were talking about, again, ministry. And he was asking me what is going on in America. And I said, a lot of times why people are confused is because many are not being led to read the Spirit of Prophecy for themselves. They're not picking up the testimonies and reading to understand what is truth. They're accepting truth based off what this person has shown them. And the way that this person relates to a problem is how they're going to relate to a problem. I'll give you a case in point. People read Frazie's books. And because of how Frazee deals with conference issues and different issues in the church, that is how they run their ship. And And they relate to problems the same way Frazee relates to problems. And without being able to read through the testimonies for themselves and could be able to see, you know what, I respectfully disagree with Brother Frazee on this issue. Because again, this is how the prophet said these things ought to be done. Not looking at these things through a one-sided lens. And many people don't understand the history behind many of these brethren who have taken certain positions. And if they knew the history, then they would say, okay, well, I understand why he's saying this or she's saying that. But they don't go back and they won't look at the history. And so, brothers and sisters, this is why we have to read. We have to pick these testimonies up and read it. And so even when we can look at people like Frazee, like HMS Richards, like Emma Andreasen, and different people that have had issues in their past with the brethren, we can look at these issues and we can judge them from what we have read consistently through. And we're able to say, okay, I understand Frazee's position, although I respectfully disagree with his position, but I see why and what led him to make these decisions, because I understand the history of the controversy or the conflict that he was dealing with. And so because I read the testimonies, I could say I understand that. And you don't have to charge people as being quote unquote cowards or being extreme, because you understand the history behind it. And you can continue to move forward and continue to address the issues as God would have us to address them. And so this is why, people often, well, what books do you recommend? I recommend the Conflict series and the reading of the testimonies. I don't recommend reading other people's books per se until you understand what God has said and how it is to be done, so that you are not a reflector of other men's thoughts, And so when I went through the book, Another Rock to Build, I understood why the certain brethren take positions that they take. I say, wow, they've taken Frazee and they have resurrected his ideas. And this is what they present to the people as though they're theirs. But in reality, they have made Frazee's thoughts and ideas their own. And so I understand why they take certain issues with certain positions that I myself may be taking, or Enriquez or others, because I understand where they're getting these ideas from. So again, the mind has to change as it relates to what the work of God is. So I want to encourage you, brothers and sisters, read the testimonies, read the Conflict series, so that as God begins to move you in a direction, you'll understand why you're being moved in that direction. And you won't feel like you're being swayed by one sector of the church over another sector. You can see clearly, okay, I see why God is moving me in this direction, because you have something to govern. You have something in which to relate it to. And too often we don't have anything to relate it. We either accept or reject based off our, if it sounds good to us, we accept it. If we don't, we reject it. But we have nothing by which to govern our decisions. And so I'm praying for you. I pray that you pray for us here as we continue to work in the way that God is revealing His work. And again, it's not no unique revelation that God has given me. Again, back to these testimonies, the mind must change. Why the work took so long to get to the point where at sometimes we see it is because the mind was slow to change and move in the direction that God's Spirit was leading in. And this is why we see some of the conflicts over the ages, not only from the fall of man, but in our days. And so I pray that you would be able to be blessed by some of the things that are shared here. And I pray that by God's grace, we'll be able to bring you more of these things in the future. So until then, God bless.
You've been listening to gospel media recorded by Everlasting Gospel Bible School with Pastor Deron Tinsley. To contact, support, or obtain similar media from Everlasting Gospel Bible School, contact us at P.O. Box 204-209, Augusta, Georgia 30917, or call us at 706-421-7719. And lastly, on the web, visit us at egbibleschool.org. Again, that's egbibleschool.org. May God richly bless you.